All right, hello friends. Today I'm going to show you one of my favorite basil plants. So now everybody calls me the basil connoisseur, so I like all kinds of basil, but I have found that some of them can be a little more challenging to grow. And I shouldn't even say that. From seed, I have a lot of success growing them, but I have a lot of trouble getting them to actually grow to a appropriate large size later. So it is the African Blue Basil that I want to show you today, because this by far is the one that I think we've had most luck with. The last few years, it's tended to be really, really hot and dry as far as the weather. And we've had a lot of problems with other plants and even my basils. It's, for the last couple of years, it has been quite a challenge to keep some of those basils alive and thriving, but this one has definitely aced all of those tests to date. So I wanted to show you that this is one of my favorite ones to grow. And I have also heard some people who, because we're here in Florida, a lot of people in Florida, I've heard them say this also is one of the plants that they like growing the most, because apparently it tolerates humidity better, which, because obviously in Florida we have a lot of humidity, that is one thing that we have to deal with. And certain other types of basil, which, thinking about it, because a lot of those do come from like Mediterranean areas and places where it's more arid, they don't have to deal with that. So I have a feeling that's why those basils do grow better in drier, hot climates, whereas this one does actually thrive in a more humid climate. And as you can see too, you can see some little bees and insects around here. So all of the pollinators really like this plant, so that's another reason that I like having it. But as far as the African blue basil goes, it also is still very versatile. It still tastes different than some of your culinary basils, like the Genovese and the sweet basils and things like that. But this one, I've replaced the basil in a lot of my cooking with this kind, and I think it suits it just fine. I've never really had a problem with using it there. So that is another benefit of it, is it's very similar still to a lot of the culinary basils that people like to grow. And the African blue basils do not produce viable seeds. So this is one you want to spread it or make more plants from it by cutting. So I'm actually going to show you all how I do that today. So let me get my scissors. So usually on the plant, I like to pick a nice, more of a tougher stem. That's usually what I like to go with. Let's see. I'll go for this one. And in general too, like all other basils, I also like to periodically trim them a little bit anyway, because that does help them make more branches and more flowers as the season goes on. And then of course I use that in cooking, or I feed the chickens. Well, chickens should eat it. Ours don't necessarily like to eat it, but my rabbits definitely like to eat this. So I've got a jar of water here and a little pail of dirt. So I'm going to show you two methods that I use for that. So depending on how big of a branch you've got here, I will even divide them up into several sections, but then I like to pull the leaves off of it. Or you can cut them if that's easier. But the reason I like to do that is because that puts more of the plant's energy into making roots and not putting it back into the leaves. So for the dirt, I just make sure then that it's really packed in, because that really helps the roots get hold in there when they start to grow. And as I said, I like to take pieces that are a little more firm and woody to use, but I have tried with just little pieces sometimes where I would just stick them in some dirt or water for the heck of it just to see, and oftentimes they do still end up getting some roots and making another plant. So this method I've definitely found to work pretty well, doing it in the dirt, again, as long as you keep it packed. This is just normal potting soil I have in this one here, and that seems to work. But even for other cuttings, I will mention that sometimes having more sandy soil, interestingly, when you're doing cuttings, actually seems to help it produce the roots better. I guess because the sandy soil really stays around the stems a lot more firmly. So I've found that I've had a lot more success with doing that with the sandy soil. And as far as the water method, it's pretty simple. I do the same thing. I just get it all trimmed and then I leave it in water. And another tip is when doing the cuttings, I also like to leave them in, like to leave them outside because they still need the light, but I leave them in more of a shady place because when the direct sun hits them, sometimes that will end up killing them off. So usually I like to keep it in a shady spot, but somewhere where they still have light access. And same thing for the water cuttings. I'll keep them outside where they have access to light, and if I have to bring them in, I'll leave them in a windowsill or somewhere where they can get light. And then let me show you. So here are some African blue basil cuttings I did probably, I don't know, a little longer than a week ago, but those ones seem to have caught pretty nicely here, as you can see. But I get quite a few plants off doing that. And also, if you look over there, there is more African blue basil. I don't know that for certain about this one. This may be the blue spice basil because there is another type of basil that's very similar. It's called the blue spice basil that we do have, so that might be that. But that, I believe, is the African blue. That was even a cutting, I think, that we grew out there. But the blue spice basil is also, because it's very similar, I would say it has a lot of the same properties, the same ease of creating cuttings, and just it tolerates the humidity and heat a lot better than some of the other basil types. So I think that is all I had to show you, but I hope that that introduced you maybe to a new plant that you've never actually seen before, and if not, at least given you an idea, if you really like basil, what type you would want to grow in that case. That would be easiest and most prolific for you.